But believers, people during that time of the Millerites, when they realized that the sanctuary, that God hadn't come and they were disappointed now, they actually continued to study the Bible and they found evidence of a sanctuary that actually exists in heaven. And so we can find evidence of this in Hebrews chapter 8. Hebrews chapter 8, and we're going to read verse 1 and verse 2. Hebrews chapter 8, verses 1 and verse 2. Hebrews 8, verse 1 and verse 2. It says, "Now of the things which we have spoken, this is the sum. We have such an high priest who is set on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens, a minister of the true sanctuary and of the true tabernacle which the Lord pitched, and not man." So this verse, or these two verses, are clearly telling us that there is a sanctuary, and Jesus is the minister of that sanctuary, and it's a sanctuary that the Lord pitched and not man. It also says that it's a true tabernacle. And so there's this idea that the earthly tabernacle, the one that God instructed Moses to build, wasn't the true tabernacle, but it was only a representation of a true sanctuary that exists in heaven. Let's go to Exodus chapter 25, and we're going to read verse 9 and verse 40. This is back to the instruction of God to Moses to build this earthly sanctuary. Exodus 25, and read verse 9. Well, let's start from verse 8. It says, "And let them make me a sanctuary, that I may dwell among them, according to all that I show thee, after the pattern of the tabernacle, and the pattern of all the instruments thereof, even so shall he make it." So he's saying after the pattern of the tabernacle. Okay? So there's a particular pattern that God has given Moses, and God is telling Moses that he should build the earthly sanctuary according to that pattern. Well, verse 40 says, "And look, that thou make them after the pattern which I showed thee in the mount." So God clearly gave Moses a pattern, showed him, took him up to this mountain, showed him a pattern of a tabernacle, of a sanctuary, and said, build this sanctuary, build this earthly sanctuary according to this pattern that I show you. John also saw this pattern, or saw this sanctuary, this heavenly sanctuary, in vision. If we go to Revelation chapter 4, and we'll read from verse 5, Revelation chapter 4, verse 5, it says, "And out of the throne proceeded lightnings and thunderings and voices, and there were 7 lamps of fire burning before the throne of God, which are the 7 spirits of God." So John sees in heaven, he sees this, he sees these 7 lamps, and those 7 lamps are very much like the 7 lamps, 7-branched lampstand that we saw in the earthly sanctuary. Revelation 8 verse 3 says, "And another angel came and stood at the altar, having a golden censer, and there was given unto him much incense, that he should offer it with the prayers of all the saints upon the golden altar which was before the throne." So once again, before the throne of God in heaven, there is something similar to what we saw in the earthly sanctuary. There is an altar of incense, and this is now before the throne in heaven. So this is more evidence that there is a sanctuary in heaven. And Revelation 11 verse 19 says, "And the temple of God was opened in heaven, and there was seen in his temple the ark of his testament, and there were lightnings and voices and thunderings, and an earthquake and great hail." So the last item that we see there is this ark of the testament, or the ark of the covenant, also now in heaven. So there's quite a bit of evidence that we see that there is a sanctuary that exists in heaven.